You're tuned into the Robert Judat podcast. Refined thinking, elevated conversations, and truth delivered with style. Stay curious.
You know, when you buy a piece of complex furniture, you usually get that little exact instruction manual.
Right, like insert peg A into slot B.
Exactly. You tighten a screw, and boom, you have a bookshelf. There's this expectation of precision, like you follow the steps, you control the outcome.
Yeah, but then you step out of your living room and into the actual world.
Right. You read the morning news, or, I don't know, your subway train stalls in a tunnel, your inbox catches fire. And suddenly that clean, step-by-step manual is just entirely useless.
The real world definitely doesn't have a slot B.
It really doesn't. And dealing with that unpredictable, chaotic reality is basically the entire premise of evolutionary biologist Massimo Pigliucci's work. So welcome to the Deep Dive, where today we are extracting Pigliucci's insights to build you a 21st century survival guide.
Yeah, we are exploring Stoicism today, and not as some dusty ancient history, but as an actual evidence-based toolkit for living a rational and, deeply pro-social life.
But, to even begin using that toolkit, we really have to clear away the immense amount of cultural garbage surrounding the term first.
Oh, there is so much garbage. If you tell someone today that you practice Stoicism, they immediately picture like a hyper-masculine internet culture alpha guy.
Yeah, the guy who suppresses every emotion, acts like a robot, and just maintains a stiff upper lip while the world literally burns around him.
Right, and that myth is so pervasive. It almost feels like a defense mechanism against a complicated world, Just turn off your feelings and you can't get hurt.
But Pigliucci points out that this modern bro-stoicism narrative is built on a fundamental misunderstanding. It partly stems from a bad translation, right, of the word virtue.
It does. The people pushing this ultra-modern narrative often claim that virtue comes from the Latin word vir, meaning man.
Which implies it's inherently a philosophy of manliness.
Exactly. They use that etymological link. But the massive flaw in that argument is that Stoicism isn't even a Roman philosophy. It originated in Greece.
Oh.
Yeah, the original Greek word the founders used was arete, which translates to excellence. It is a completely gender-neutral concept. It simply means performing your function well, doing the best you can as a human being.
Which completely changes the baseline. And the ancient Stoic writers, like Epictetus and Seneca, they were actually quite progressive for their era, weren't they?
Very much so. They explicitly wrote that women possess the exact same rational capacities and are just as capable of practicing philosophy as men.
So framing this as an exclusive boys' club just ignores the actual texts.
Entirely. Pigliucci defines the core of the philosophy by looking at what kind of organism a human being actually is.
Right.
The Stoics observe two fundamental facts about our species. We are deeply social creatures, and we are uniquely capable of reason. So a flourishing human life means applying your reason to solve problems while behaving in a cooperative, pro-social way.
You remember the universal human city.
Exactly. Your goal isn't isolation, it is connection.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Because if the goal is connection, then the idea of being an emotionless rock completely falls apart.
You literally can't connect with people if you don't feel anything.
Right, and suppressing emotions is just a terrible psychological strategy anyway.
Yeah.
It's like trying to hold a giant beach ball underwater.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah, you can use all your physical strength to force it down, but eventually your arms fatigue and that beach ball explodes right up into your face, usually at the worst possible moment.
And the Stoics understood the danger of that beach ball perfectly. They recognized that you cannot just sever the emotional part of your brain. The objective isn't suppression, it's rational processing.
And modern neuroscience has recently caught up to what these philosophers deduced, like over 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, reason and emotion are not two opposing armies battling for territory inside your skull. Look at the actual physical structure of the brain.
Pigliucci's breakdown of this is fascinating.
Right, so the amygdala, located near the base of the brain, generates many of our raw emotional responses. But it doesn't operate in a vacuum. It is massively interconnected with our frontal lobes, the area responsible for high-level reasoning and logic.
So there are physical connections between them.
Billions of them, neuronal fibers constantly firing back and forth. You literally cannot have an emotional response that is truly independent of your cognitive judgment.
So our thoughts and our feelings are physically wired together. The anger isn't just happening to you, your brain is actively participating in making it.
Exactly. Think about Pigliucci's example of being insulted on the street.
Oh, I love this one.
Right, someone walks up, yells something terrible at you, and your adrenaline spikes. Most of us assume the insult directly caused the anger, but break down the physical reality.
It's just sound waves.
Yes, someone opens their mouth, vocal cords vibrate, and they push air around. It is literally just sound waves hitting your eardrum. Sound waves do not contain anger.
Wow. Put that way, it sounds ridiculous to get mad at vibrating air.
Right. The emotion of anger only arises after your brain makes a cognitive judgment about those sound waves. Your brain translates them and says, hey, I've been disrespected, I've been wronged. That translation is what triggers the amygdala.
Which means the anger is entirely in the translation, not the actual event.
Exactly.
So if you intercept that thought, like if you tell yourself, well, this person's just making noises, their opinion has no bearing on my character. And if they're mistaken, that's their tragedy to bear.
If you do that, the emotion physically de-escalates. You alter the judgment, and the emotion is forced to follow suit.
And that specific mechanism, changing the thought to change the feeling, that's the absolute cornerstone of cognitive behavioral therapy, right? CBT.
It is. In the 1960s, psychologists Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck were literally studying ancient Stoic texts. They took this exact premise, that our distress is caused by our judgments rather than external events, and formalized it into clinical practice.
That is wild. CBT is the most widely used evidence-based psychotherapy globally, and its lineage traces straight back to a Roman emperor's diary and a Greek slave's lectures.
The way they categorize certain emotions is fascinating, too. They treat anger like junk food.
Junk food.
Yeah, from an evolutionary perspective, craving sugar and fat kept our ancestors alive when food was incredibly scarce. It's a natural biological drive.
Okay, so like how a quick flash of anger might have been useful to fight off a physical threat on the savannah.
Exactly. But context is everything. In a modern environment, constantly indulging that craving for junk food will destroy your physical health. And a Stoic argues that indulging in anger will destroy your mental health.
Because anger feels deeply satisfying in the moment, much like eating a box of donuts.
Right. But chronic anger impairs your ability to act reasonably. It damages your social connections.
Okay, but wait. Here's where it gets really interesting. If the core of this is just cognitive reframing, basically hacking your own brain to de-escalate anxiety, couldn't a ruthless corporate executive use CBT to flawlessly fire 1,000 people without losing a wink of sleep?
Oh, they absolutely could.
So you can use these tools to become a perfectly calm, highly productive sociopath.
You can, and people definitely do. But that highlights the critical distinction between a psychological tool and a philosophy of life.
Ah, I see.
CBT is merely the tool. It's morally neutral. It just helps you manage anxiety. Stoicism is the compass that tells you where to point that tool. A true practitioner doesn't use cognitive reframing just to be calm.
They use it to clear their minds so they can be cooperative and just.
Exactly.
Virtuous.
That brings up an inevitable friction point, though. Achieving internal clarity is one thing, but how do we apply this when we step out the door? I mean, we live in an era characterized by constant, overwhelming external chaos.
The news cycle alone is enough to induce a panic attack.
Seriously, so how does Stoicism handle that? That friction is exactly why Epictetus developed the dichotomy of control. It is arguably the most powerful mechanism in the entire philosophy. It demands that you ruthlessly divide every aspect of your life into two distinct columns.
What is up to us and what is not up to us?
Precisely. And most people are familiar with this concept without realizing its origins.
Like the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can.
Exactly. That isn't just a 20th century invention. During the Middle Ages, Christian monks repurposed Epictetus's handbook as a manual for spiritual exercises.
Okay, so let's apply that to a modern high-stakes scenario, like going in for a crucial job interview. The natural human tendency is to just stress obsessively about getting the offer.
But getting the job belongs firmly in the not up to me column. You cannot control the specific qualifications of the other candidates.
Right. Or whether the interviewer woke up with a headache.
Or if they have an unconscious bias against your tie. You can't even guarantee you'll get a perfect night's sleep beforehand. Your neighbor might decide to test a new sound system at 2 in the morning.
So the up to me column is actually surprisingly small.
Very small. It only encompasses your intentions and your agency. You control how meticulously you prepare your portfolio. You control leaving your apartment an hour early to account for subway delays.
You focus 100% of your psychological energy on those inputs, and you just radically accept whatever emerges on the other side.
And this scales up to the most paralyzing existential threats we face today, too. Take global climate change.
Right, the ultimate macro problem.
If your internal metric for success is, I must solve the climate crisis, you will be absolutely crushed by despair. The macro outcome is fundamentally beyond the direct control of any single individual.
But reducing your own carbon footprint, or donating to effective environmental organizations, voting for specific policies, protesting those actions, sits squarely in your up to me column.
Yes, you execute those actions with extreme vigor, but you maintain equanimity about the global result. You avoid the burnout that comes from tying your emotional stability to forces you don't command.
I have to challenge the reality of that radical acceptance, though. Because if a tyrannical government takes over, and the outcome is technically beyond my control, doesn't accepting that turn me into a passive doormat? It sounds like a philosophy of complacency.
It really does sound that way to modern ears, but history provides a very violent refutation of that idea. During the Roman Empire, there was a faction known as the Stoic opposition.
Senators and philosophers who openly defied emperors,
Yeah.
right? Like Nero.
And Domitian. They knew speaking truth to a dictator would likely result in their execution.
Because speaking the truth was in their up to me column, even if surviving the afternoon wasn't.
Exactly. The ultimate embodiment of this is Cato the Younger. He was a Roman senator who watched Julius Caesar systematically dismantle the Republic to install himself as a dictator.
And Cato didn't just sit in his villa murmuring about radical acceptance.
No, he raised an army. He physically marched troops across deserts to engage Caesar in a brutal civil war to defend democratic principles.
He literally went to war over his dichotomy of control.
He fought until the military reality was undeniably lost. Caesar eventually cornered Cato's forces, but Caesar was a master of political theater. He wanted to capture his enemies alive, pardon them, and use that mercy to prove his absolute power.
And Cato recognized he couldn't control the fate of the Republic anymore.
But he still controlled his own integrity. So rather than allow a tyrant to use him as a prop, Cato chose to take his own life. He stabbed himself.
And it gets even more intense, right?
It's incredibly intense. When his friends found him, a physician attempted to stitch the wound to save him for Caesar. But Cato regained consciousness, physically fought off the doctor, and tore his own stitches open to ensure he died a free man.
That is just a staggering level of agency. It completely obliterates the passive doormat critique. They accept the reality of the board they are playing on, but they will fight to the bitter end to execute the right move.
Exactly. They draw a hard line where their power ends, but they operate fiercely within the territory they do control.
Okay, conceptually, dividing the world into columns makes perfect sense. But let's be honest about human nature here. When you are exhausted and a cab splashes mud on you, or a colleague takes credit for your work in a meeting,
You aren't thinking about Cato or the Roman Republic.
right, your amygdala is just screaming. How do we actually train our brains to default to this framework in real time?
Pigliucci uses a brilliant analogy here. Understanding Stoic ethics isn't like studying geometry, it's like weightlifting.
How so?
Well, reading a comprehensive textbook about the biomechanics of a bicep curl does not cause your muscles to grow. You can memorize the perfect form, but until you walk into a gym and repeatedly lift heavy iron, your body remains exactly the same.
So knowing the philosophy isn't enough. You have to put in the reps. And the primary gym for a Stoic is the practice of philosophical journaling.
Yes. The most famous text in this entire tradition is Meditations by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. And modern readers sometimes find it repetitive, almost as if he's preaching the same basic concepts over and over.
But he wasn't writing a book for publication. He was literally doing his daily reps.
Exactly.
He's the most powerful man in the world, dealing with plagues, betrayals, and incredibly annoying courtiers, and he had to sit down in his tent every night and write, "Remember, people are flawed. Do not let them compromise your character."
It was his private workout journal. Pigliucci distills this practice into a highly specific 3-question routine that you can perform right before bed to build that same cognitive muscle.
And the crucial psychological trick here, which modern therapy completely validates, is shifting your pronouns, right? You don't write in the first person.
Right. Instead of writing, "I snapped at my spouse during dinner," you write, "Why did you snap at your spouse during dinner?"
Using the second person forces a sudden artificial distance. It acts like a psychological drone shot.
That's a great way to picture it.
It pulls you out of your defensive ego, zooming up into the air so you can look down at yourself objectively. You end up coaching yourself with the same gentle rationality you would use if you were advising a close friend.
And from that elevated perspective, you address the first question, what did I do wrong?
Strictly analytical observation. Not an invitation for self-flagellation.
Right. You are diagnosing a missed block in a football game, not condemning your soul.
The second question is vital for momentum. What did I do right? We all have such a negativity bias, so you really have to deliberately document your successful reps to establish a baseline of growth.
And then the third question is the true cognitive training. What could I do differently next time? Because the reality of human existence is that it is highly repetitive.
Next Tuesday is always coming.
Exactly. The specific colleague who talked over you in today's meeting is highly likely to talk over you in next Tuesday's meeting.
And by answering that third question, you are preloading your brain with the rational response. When the interruption happens, your brain doesn't have to scramble to figure out what to do while the amygdala is firing.
It just reaches for the script you already wrote. Seneca famously noted that a prepared mind handles difficulties with much greater ease. You are building emotional reflexes in a controlled environment, so they deploy automatically in a chaotic one.
Part of that preparation also involves confronting how we handle the loss of good things, doesn't it? Pigliucci brings up Epictetus's metaphor of the figs in winter, which completely changes how we view attachment.
Yes. One of Epictetus's students was incredibly distraught because a close friend was moving far away. Epictetus told him that weeping over the departure of a friend is like weeping because you cannot find fresh figs in the dead of winter.
It ignores the natural seasons of life.
Right. Things exist in their proper time, and demanding they exist forever is just a recipe for misery. Epictetus suggested treating life like you are a traveler staying at a hotel.
Okay, I like this.
When you walk into your room, you can deeply appreciate the comfortable bed, you can admire the beautiful lamp on the desk, but you don't form an unhealthy attachment to them.
Because you know you're only passing through.
Exactly. Eventually, you have to check out and leave the lamp behind. The same logic applies to our circumstances, our careers, and even the people we love. Care for them deeply while they are here, but prepare your mind to accept the winter when the season inevitably turns.
So, summarizing the toolkit we've extracted today, this clearly isn't a philosophy of unfeeling statues. It is a highly active, scientifically validated system for navigating a chaotic reality.
Very much so.
You understand the physical connection between thought and emotion. You ruthlessly sort your life into the dichotomy of control to conserve your energy. And you hit the journaling gym every night to prepare for tomorrow.
It remains incredibly robust. But Pigliucci poses a really fascinating challenge for anyone practicing this today. We cannot simply copy and paste the ancient texts into our lives.
Right, because the ancient Stoics operated under a scientific worldview that we now know is incorrect. They were pantheists. They believed in providence.
Yes. They viewed the entire universe as a living, rational organism. To them, nature itself was divine. Therefore, every single event, whether it was a devastating plague, a lost battle, or a personal tragedy, was a necessary gear turning in a perfect cosmic plan.
And if you truly believe everything happens for a divine reason, radical acceptance is infinitely easier. It offers an immense psychological safety net.
But a 21st century practitioner has to reconcile their philosophy with modern science, specifically Charles Darwin's theory of evolution.
One kind of throws a wrench in the cosmic plan.
He really does. He demonstrated that the complexity of life arises from the blind, unguided process of natural selection, not from a grand cosmic designer.
We just don't have the luxury of that warm cosmic blanket anymore. We exist in a universe that is chaotically neutral. I mean, it isn't actively trying to destroy you, but it certainly isn't looking out for you either.
And removing providence means the burden of creating meaning falls entirely on our shoulders. We cannot rely on the universe to provide justice or purpose. We have to construct those things ourselves.
Through our reason, our virtue, and how we choose to treat one another.
Exactly, in the time we have.
Which means the instruction manual for life isn't hidden in the stars or stamped in ancient Rome. We have to write the manual ourselves every single day using the best tools available. If a philosophy that is 2,000 years old must constantly evolve with our understanding of science to remain useful, what will the Stoicism of the 25th century look like? What new tools will we need to survive whatever chaos comes next? That is something for you to figure out in your own journal tonight.